I stumbled upon 3 disturbing reality horror stories that will haunt your every waking moment. I never should have opened that door. My heart thumped as the chill crawled down my spine. I was just making coffee in my cozy kitchen, the smell of roasted beans filling the air, when I heard Ida faint, raspy whisper tickling my ear. I looked around, my shoulders tensing. Shadows danced along the walls, painted by the flickering light. The kitchen was normally my sanctuary. Bright mornings, laughter, warmth. Now, darkness engulfed the corners like a hungry beast waiting to pounce. I felt the cold seep in, a silky ice blanket wrapping itself around my bones. My breath quickened, and the coffee pot sputtered angrily, echoing my panic. I stepped closer to the door, curious despite the dread knotting in my stomach. What could be so interesting? The whispers grew louder, jagged voices overlapping, clawing at my sanity. I gripped the doorknob. I could feel the cold metal beneath my fingertips, a warning that sent shivers through me. I hesitated, but then turned the knob gently. It creaked like a dying animal announcing my intrusion. A thick, musty smell spilled out into my space, like wet earth and decay. The air was dense, suffocating. I wanted to retreat, but something pulled me in. Inside that room, shadows loomed like the grim figures from tales too horrific to recall. Peeked in and my heart dropped. A frail, hollow shape stood motionless, barely illuminated by the sliver of light sneaking in. I couldn't make out its features, but I felt its eyes, cold and piercing, boring into my soul. I stepped back, gasping. The figure lifted a hand decrepit, with fingers twitching like dying leaves. My pulse raced. I could hear my own blood pumping in my ears, drowning out the whispers. Then, a loud crash echoed from the hallway behind me. I spun around, and the shadows twisted, a thick darkness crawling towards me. My breath hitched. What was happening? This eerie stillness cracked with frenzy as I turned back to the room. The figure was gone. Silence fell, heavy and thick as night. I stumbled back, but against the cold floor. Then, the door slammed shut behind me. Darkness enveloped my world. I screamed, "Hey! Before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon, and while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The darkness swallowed me whole, every ounce of light extinguished as if a beast had bared its fangs and snuffed it out. I strained my eyes, trying to pierce through the black void. Every second stretched into an eternity. My heart thundered in my chest, a frantic reminder that I was still alive, still able to feel the creeping cold seep into my bones. That I scrambled to my feet, limbs shaky and uncertain, fumbling for the doorknob that had just moments ago betrayed me. My fingers brushed against the rough wood but found nothing. The door wasn't just shut. It felt locked, as though some unseen force was sealing me in. Desperation gnawed at me, and I began to pound against the door, my cries swallowed by the oppressive silence. "Help!" I shouted, though the echo of my own voice served only to deepen my isolation. The whispers returned, now swirling around me like a dark cloud, taunting and shrieking, ever so slightly louder, as if tasting my fear. "Leave now, never safe," the words wrapped around me, a sinister choir rising and falling with each tremor of dread in my chest. My mind raced, desperately grasping for rationality, but all I wanted was to escape this hellish cocoon. Just then, the hair on the back of my neck prickled. A low hum mingling with the whispers began to resonate in the room. It was steady, an unsettling melody that lured me toward the far corner behind an old bookshelf stuffed with decaying tomes. I resisted, fighting against the curiosity that burned within me. But the hum pulled me closer as I approached. Shadows shifted again, forming shapes that just brushed against the edges of my peripheral vision. I dared not look, yet I felt them it was as though they thrummed along with the terrible melody. My breath came hot and sharp, the insistent pacing of a predator stalking its prey. A glint caught my eye, a sliver of silver barely visible beneath the rot of old paper and dust. I knelt down, heart pounding louder with each pulse. My fingers hesitated for an instant before I grasped it, revealing an ornate locket, tarnished and intricate. The moment I opened it, a breathy sigh escaped from within, wrapping around me as though the very essence of sorrow had been unleashed. Inside the locket were small photos, faded yet intimately familiar. Faces I had once loved, vibrant and smiling from happier times. My mother, my best friend, all taken before the bitter veil of tragedy had settled over my life. Panic surged, and I clutched it to my heart, nostrils flaring as my mind raced. Why were these gathered here? And which wretched soul was using these memories against me? Before I could comprehend the implications, the ground trembled beneath me. The shadows coalesced into twisting figures, whispers amplifying into a cacophony that drowned out my thoughts. The figures elongated, stretching their limbs as if unfurling from the very fabric of the darkness. Tendrils snaked closer, curled fingers beckoning with relentless hunger. The locket slipped from my fingers and clattered to the floor, the dull sound echoing ominously like a taunt. As I bent to retrieve it, the air thickened, stinging my eyes, suffocating me with an unholy chill. Suddenly, a piercing scream ripped through the room's own voice, but it felt distant, as if someone else were echoing my fears. That I looked up, heart racing, and my eyes met those of the figure from before. The frail outline flickered back into existence, now standing inches from me. Its hand reached out, impossibly long fingers curling toward my face. The silence shattered as horrible laughter erupted around me, reverberating through the walls, a sound laden with malice that squeezed my heart. And then, as I screamed again, my own voice swallowed by the grotesque chorus, the world began to blur. Just as I felt the cold touch of the figure against my skin, a brilliant flash erupted around me, a flash not of light, but of blinding darkness. That I stumbled back, my heart racing, and one single thought crept into my mind as everything dissolved around me. If this was a nightmare, how would I ever wake up? The darkness was no longer just a void. It had an oppressive weight, pressing down on me like a lead shroud. I could barely breathe as the air crackled around me, heavy with a tension that felt alive. There was a whisper in the silence, a soft, unrelenting call that melded with my fear, coaxing me deeper into the abyss. With every nerve in my body screaming at me to flee, I turned to where I thought the door had been. But before I could take a step, the ground shifted underfoot, a shudder that resonated through the floor as if the house itself were writhing in agony. I stumbled, catching myself just in time to avoid falling into the suffocating shadows. In the oppressive dark, shapes began to coalesce once more. This time they formed into more distinct figures. Each one bore a resemblance to those I held dear, their faces twisted in agonizing rictus, trapped in a liminal space between life and death. Their eyes were voids, black, hollow pits that devoured all light and hope. Panic surged anew, and I staggered back, colliding with the wall, trapping me within a claustrophobic whirlpool of despair. "Save us," one of the specters pleaded, its voice a melancholic echo of my past. I recoiled, fear gripping my throat. The locket lay abandoned, its images haunting me from the periphery. How had I strayed into this wretched realm, where the very essence of my memories had been tainted? I clenched my fists, wrestling against the torrent of emotions as the shadows crept closer. The air turned frigid, biting into my skin like 1,000 sharp needles. I could hear the sound of their cries, layered beneath my frantic heartbeat, a symphony of sorrow that threatened to unravel any semblance of sanity I had left. A sacrifice. The whispering figures chorused, their voices merging into a sing-song of dread. For us to return, for us to be free, the notion twisted in my mind, each word a knife turning deeper. I felt an overwhelming urge to reach out, to embrace the specters like lost souls reunited at last, but the reality of their presence was as horrific as the memories they invoked. "Your life is tethered to ours," another figure rasped, its ethereal hands reaching out, fingers like wisps of smoke. "You cannot escape." Not until you understand the price. Sweat dripped from my brow, and I clenched my jaw, horrified by the implication. Suddenly, without warning, the space around me distorted, like the surface of a lake rippled by a stone thrown into its depths. The shadows elongated, twisting grotesquely as they drew me inward, an undeniable gravitational pull toward something darker still. And then I remembered the stories, those haunting fables whispered late at night. Tales of trapped souls, bargaining pieces of their beings for freedom. Was this the curse of those who came before me? The tales coalesced in my mind, feeding the fear, each word a phantom that gripped my heart tighter. Join us, they intoned, their voices low and dripping with sinister allure. Be a part of our story. I staggered back against the wall, desperately surveying my surroundings for any sign of escape. The very shadows slithered along the ground, creeping closer, their cold tendrils reaching hungrily for my ankles. I could feel their chill seep through my skin, stealing the warmth of my lifeblood. A scream lodged itself in my throat as the ethereal laughter surged once more, echoing off unseen walls around me with mind-numbing intensity. Just when I thought I could bear no more, an earth-shattering rumble rose from below, vibrating through the very bones of the house. The wooden planks groaned like a wounded creature, and with it came a shattering sensation. Something deep below was awakening. Something ancient, insatiable, and furious. The ground beneath me gave way, and I was swallowed by plunging darkness, the walls of the house imploding around me as I tumbled into whatever cursed fate lay within. My body fell through an infinite void, my screams lost to the cavernous depths. And then, just as abruptly, everything stopped. I lay on the cold, unforgiving ground, a surface not of wood or earth, but something gelatinous and writhing, exuding a malevolent warmth. I exhaled sharply, body thrumming with sheer terror, my heart racing as I turned instinctively to flee, only to find myself surrounded by the very figures I had tried to escape. But their faces bore no trace of the anguish from before, only insidious grins full of mirth. They stepped forward in unison, their outstretched arms beckoning as a siren call then filled the air, sweet yet laced with impending doom. "Welcome to your new home," they sang, the words a cascade of darkness that poured into my very being. And just as I felt the first tendril of despair latch onto me, the ground echoed with a deafening crack, and the darkness surged, something powerful stirring beneath. Hungry and waiting above all else, I was no longer just a prisoner in the house. I had become part of its unfolding tale. The walls pulsated like a living thing, the morbid warmth swelling beneath me as I lay on that nightmarish surface. Whispers surged from the walls, crawling into my ears in a cacophony of disjointed phrases, fragments of lost laughter, cries of despair, and promises unkept. It felt as if the very air around me had taken on a consciousness, wrapping its tendrils around my throat, pushing me down into the bowels of despair. The once tender faces of the specters surrounding me had transformed, their smiles now grotesque and sharp, revealing teeth that gleamed like knives against the darkness. They leaned closer, their breath a chill that slithered into my very bones. "The feast is about to begin," one whispered, its voice dripping with sickening glee, echoing through the void-like chamber. I struggled to my feet, my heart racing like a trapped animal. My instincts screamed for me to run, but the laughter of the figures held me in place, a spell woven from the very dread that had enveloped me. "You belong here," they chanted, their voices a sinister hymn that reverberated off the pulsing walls, resonating with an urgency that made the ground beneath me quiver. A sudden tremor rumbled again, more forceful this time, a surge of power that rattled my very core. With horror, I realized the gelatinous surface began to squirm, shifting underfoot like a waking beast. I glanced around, searching for an escape from this hellish domain, but the faces of the damned crowded me, their relentless approach punctuated by laughter that felt like icy blades against my skin. And then I saw a doorway, or at least a semblance of one, flickering at the edges of the chaos. It was a mass of shadow woven tightly, an escape shimmering with the promise of reprieve. But as I took a step toward it, the ground let out a piercing roar, and the walls around me constricted, slamming shut like the jaws of a beast. It was a moment of profound panic. I felt myself slide back hopelessly, a marionette caught in fraying strings from the shadows cast by the figures. A new presence emerged, a being of darkness, far larger than anything I had faced. It loomed over the crowd, its eyes glowing like molten iron, radiating an aura of pure malice. Every cursed breath I took filled my lungs with its stench, foul and acrid, a miasma born from the graves of despair. Your price is not just life, it growled, the very ground quaking beneath its weight. You will offer yourself as the progenitor of this realm. Feed us your fears. We shall feast. My heart twisted in agony as those monstrous words sank into my psyche. This was not just an encounter. It was a contract, a binding invocation that tore at the sanity I clung to. Every angle of my mind screamed that I had no choice, that submission was not an option, but instinct fought against reason with desperation surging. I lunged for the flickering doorway, forcing my legs to propel me forward with every ounce of strength I had left. The figures shrieked, their laughter curdling into furious howls, trying to drag me back with their shadowy tendrils, coiling around my feet, my waist, my throat. I thrashed against them, tearing at the darkness that sought to consume me as I reached the threshold. The ground erupted beneath me, splitting wide like a gaping maw ready to swallow me whole. The eldritch creature above roared, sending waves of dread crashing over me, drowning my resolve. I deafened myself to the cries of the figures, broke free of their grasp, and hurled myself into the flickering light, praying it would consume me, anything but return to that abyss. But just as I felt the warmth of hope wrap around me, everything froze. The doorway flickered, stuttered, and then collapsed into itself, leaving me once again surrounded by the laughing figures, their distortion morphing into pure rage. The sundered ground below me ruptured further, and I was thrust into a Visiona torrent of memories cascading around me. I saw my loved ones screaming, their faces morphing into those of the figures, melded into a grotesque tableau of history and future. You can't escape fate, they chanted, a swirling vortex of voices blending into one, and then, in a heartbeat, the laughter stopped. The shadows drew back, forming a barrier around me, and the creature loomed forward, its maw widening impossibly. A singular sound pierced the silencia, soft, sickening squelch, and in that moment, I understood. What they had demanded, what I had tried to escape, was not just my life, it would be something far more precious, something I had taken for granted. Your story is not finished yet, the embodiment of darkness rasped as it reached out toward me, its eyes blazing brighter, eager to claim their new addition. Just as I felt the jolt of realization pulling me under, the space convulsed and everything shattered into a million shards of nothingness, leaving an overwhelming silence in its wake. Where was I? What truth lay beyond this realm? The primal instinct to survive surged within me again. But as the weight of the silence fell, the specters whispered, their voices weaving through the air with a chilling promise. You will never be free. Not until you see the truth of your heart. With the shadows thickening and the screams thundering in my ears, I stood alone, caught in the balance, me soul now ripe for the harvest. The silence felt like a living thing, wrapping around me like a suffocating shroud. I tried to pull my thoughts together, to reclaim the threads of sanity fraying in the darkness. Had I truly exchanged one horror for another, or was this still the nightmare I could not wake from? Then, as if summoned by my mounting despair, a shiver swept through the air, carrying with it the scent of decay. My surroundings shifted, walls distorted, coalescing into a new landscape that felt both familiar and alien, like a twisted reflection of my past. Gray wooden floorboards creaked beneath my feet, the dim light filtering in from unseen sources, casting long shadows filled with whispered promises of revulsion and dread. I caught sight of a mirror, warped and cracked, standing against a wall. My reflection stared back at me, but it was not alone. There existed another version, shadowy, flickering, mirroring each movement with vile precision, but with a sinister smile that didn't match the horror in my heart. It beckoned me, that dark doppelganger, twisting its lip in a mocking grin as it whispered, "Are you ready to know the truth?" The floor groaned beneath me, a deep, reverberating sound that felt like the echo of something long buried. My pulse quickened, thudding in my throat as I stepped closer to the mirror. The surface rippled, and beneath the glass, I could see flashes of memories I had long since buried me childhood home, laughter echoing in the hall, a birthday cake adorned with flickering candles, and the faces of those now lost to time, twisted in agony, each image morphed into something grotesque. The cake melted and sprouted blackened fingers. The walls of my childhood home dilated with the whispers of the damned, and the joyful laughter turned shrill, filled with dread. "They want you to forget," the reflection hissed, its eyes narrowing to slits. But I remember everything that I recoiled, stumbling backward, my breath catching in my throat. I could feel the shadows tightening around me, drawing nearer as the space warped with acrid laughter. I was ensnared, trapped between two realities, the past clawing to consume me, while the present twisted into a nightmare of familiar faces, disfigured and vengeful. "Face what you fear the most," the shadowed version of me spat, its voice echoing with unspeakable malice. "You can never escape the truth of your existence. Each moment you linger here feeds the darkness." A wave of energy pulsed through the room, disorienting me. In every corner, echoes screamed for release, and the very fabric of my sanity frayed like the edges of a long-torn tapestry. I stumbled backward again, my foot catching on something thick and unyielding. I glanced down to see a thick, black tendril coiled around my ankle, burrowing deeper into the floorboards that began to ooze. Like a living mass hungry for nourishment that I writhed, trying to shake it off, but it gripped me tighter, dragging me toward the mirror, as if it possessed a will of its own. My reflection cackled, a sound that reverberated in my skull, drilling deeper into my psyche. The barrier between worlds wobbled like the surface of a dark pond, threatening to shatter entirely. "Feed us your fears, child," the shadows whispered in unison, lamenting an ancient hunger that resonated within the walls. "Embrace your history, and maybe, just maybe, you'll find a way out." But deep within me, something broke. Keen ember of resistance ignited. "I won't be your prisoner," I shouted, wrenching my foot free from the tendril's grip. I stumbled away from the mirror, the laughter morphing into pained howls as the figures swirled around me, eyes flaring like lanterns in the darkness, setting my flesh alight with a searing dread. In that moment of defiance, I felt the ground begin to shake beneath me, sending tremors through both dimensions, past and present merging in a violent dance of chaos. The mirror cracked wider, and I could see through the fissures a swirling maelstrom of tormented souls seeking release, a glimpse into hell, a vision of anguish I could not unsee. Suddenly, a hand shot through the splintered glass, icy and skeletal, grasping for my throat. It was the face of someone I loved, twisted in torment, pleading for help yet also drawing me into its abyss. "Do not leave me," it wailed, voice like shattered glass cutting through my resolve. Fear gushed from within, a tidal wave crashing down on me as I felt the darkness wrap around my throat, squeezing tighter with every heartbeat. I was caught between the screams of the damned and the echoing laughter of my dark reflection, clawing at the tendrils of despair threatening to suffocate me. I closed my eyes, centering my spirit. "I will not give in," I cried, but just as the words left my lips, an explosion of light fractured the dark landscape, pulling me and the shadowed hand closer together. In that moment, it felt as though the very universe held its breath, awaiting my choice: accept the truth or be consumed by the very horror I sought to escape. As I grappled with the shadows pulling me apart, all fell silent. For an instant, every presence, every whisper, every haunted laugh stopped, leaving behind a void so complete it was almost welcoming. Then, I felt a pulse, strong and brutal, like a heartbeat beneath the stagnant surfaces. I opened my eyes to the shattered glass and saw a vision more disturbing than I could capture in memory. Subsequent visions blurred, shooting forth into my mind as frenzies of pain and death spun around me, each one a recounting of my past misdeeds, each a reason to be brought forth among the damned. And as I stood teetering on the precipice between realms, I realized there would be no salvation without accepting this new horror. But the moment I committed, the ground roared to life, splitting apart, and I fell into darkness, spiraling into a shadowy void, murmuring my name, calling me back to the very heart of despair. Then came the final horror, a whisper that cut through the silence, sending fractals of panic slicing through my mind. "You are not yet ready." You've been chosen and your story is far from over. The void swallowed me whole, and the last thing I felt was the tendril of despair signaling my arrival at a new realm where every truth I sought to uncover would become my most inviolable nightmare. The void spat me out, depositing me on a cold, uneven surface that felt alive beneath my body. I blinked, the brightness of an otherworldly glow stinging my eyes. Blinking furiously, I struggled to sit up, steadying my trembling limbs against the hard ground. I was surrounded by an expanse that defied logic, a swirling canvas of colors that morphed and shifted like liquid nightmares cascading before me. As my surroundings became clearer, my heart sank. I was on the edge of a grotesque carnival, its bright colors too vivid, too sinister against the backdrop of a foggy dusk. Twisted booths, festooned with splintered wood and peeling paint, towered ominously. Neon lights flickered sporadically, bathing everything in an eerie glow, creating shadows that danced with sinister glee. The music that wafted through the air was a warped melody of laughter and crease a funhouse jingle that sent shivers crawling up my spine. A sign creaked in the light breeze, its letters barely legible yet profoundly unsettling. Welcome to your fears. I tried to turn back, a primal instinct urging me to run. Instead, I felt a tether dragging me closer into that horrific spectacle. It was as if invisible hands guided my steps, luring me toward the worst kind of entertainment, T1 booth. A wizened figure clutched a crystal ball filled with a swirling, dark mist. A macabre fortune teller with a face too familiar. You seek the truth, do you? She rasped, her gaze piercing through the veil of irrational fantasy and into the core of my being. Step closer, and perhaps you shall uncover your own bartering with fate. That I hesitated, surveying the crowd that moved like phantoms through the gated entrance. Faces hidden in shadows turned to gaze at me, each pair of eyes glinting with an all-knowing suffering. A lavish carousel spun in the distance. Horses carved from obsidian pranced on their hind legs, each stallion's eyes a pit of despair. Their silent screams punctuated the air, suffocating me with a pulse of dread. The fortune teller gestured toward the ball, sending a chill through my psyche. Gaze into the abyss. All your memories will emerge. But be warned, you might not like what you find. I moved closer, the fog coiling around my feet as if it yearned to ensnare me. The mist within the ball roiled, reflecting flickers of my past as the images began to coalesce. Echoes of despair chanted in my mind, me choices, my failures, the people I had let down, all playing out like a distorted circus act. I saw fragments of them, faces twisted in anguish, reaching out to me for salvation yet sternly condemned by their fates. That a haunting figure emerged within the mist. The familiar outline took on pain and contorted agony. You left us behind, it hissed, the voice transparent but heavy with the weight of lost love. You chose this path, and now you must walk among the horrors you created. A wave of nausea overwhelmed me. My knees buckled, and I sank to the ground, tearing my gaze away, desperately trying to escape the truth laid bare before me. The only reprieve came with unholy laughter that erupted from the phantasmal attendees, resonating with the grotesque aftermath of my failures from behind. I felt the cruel caress of icy fingers grasping my shoulder. A chill ran down my spine as I swiveled, confronting a figure clad in a patchwork of dark garments, obscuring its features. The game has only begun, it whispered, and in that moment, the ground trembled violently. The merry-go-round burst into a cacophony of ghastly screams, horses retching screams of blood and sorrow. That I staggered back, my heart racing, a desperate will to escape coursing through me. Then, the whispers intensified, the shadows around me shifted, revealing more horrors. A jester's grin beckoned from the corner of my eye, a contorted entity half man, half monster, teasing and taunting, each jig he made emanating an impossible despair. Your past is not through with you yet, dear guest, the jester jeered, stretching his limbs impossibly wide. You cannot run from what you have become. But fear not, tonight will be a spectacle. You will not forget. The ground shook again, colder now, as the realm shifted around me. The booths loomed closer, overshadowing my sense of self, each whisper cutting deeper than the last. I realized now I was no longer an onlooker. I was a performer, and the dark carnival would not allow me to escape its grasp. Distracted, I barely noticed a creeping shadow slip through the distorted fairground's laughter. It moved like liquid darkness, slithering toward me with a purposeful intent. Heart thumping, panic surged as the realization hit, this was no mere illusion. I was surrounded by the manifestations of my past, pleading for my recognition, clawing for forgiveness I could not grant. Before I could look away, the black tendril lashed out, capturing my wrist with unyielding force. My vision blurred, and as I was dragged toward the carnival's core, the echoes of a celestial bell tolled, morose and ringing with infinite finality. Just before I vanished into the abyss, an unsettling thought sliced through the cacophony. The curtain rises on your reckoning, and I will feast on your regret. And with that, the ground fell away completely, spiraling me toward the heart of an eternal nightmare where my truths would become my worst fears, forever entangled in the horror that had a name, a form, and a will of its own. The fall felt endless, spiraling into an abyss where time lost meaning and reality twisted like the specters surrounding me. The relentless pull of my memories and fears coiled around me like serpents, constricting with each passing moment. I cried out, but no sound emerged in this void. When I finally landed, it was not with a thud but a gentle glide onto a surface that shimmered with a reflective quality, mimicking a warped funhouse mirror. The cacophony of horror faded, replaced by an unsettling silence that pressed heavily against my ears. As I stumbled to my feet, I realized I was in a hall of distorted reflections, each pane a portal to a different trauma, each one more grotesque than the last. My breath hitched as I approached the first mirror. A scene unfolded me childhood home, illuminated in the soft glow of twilight. I watched as a younger version of myself sat alone in an empty room, the walls echoing with laughter that faded into chilling silence. A flicker caught my eye, drawing me toward a reflection within the glass. Suddenly, the grim visage of my father materialized, his angry face contorted in an expression of disappointment, a frown carved deeper than flesh. He pointed towards me, a silent accusation that pierced my heart. Trembling, I stepped back, horrified by the juxtaposition of love twisted into blame. Another mirror beckoned, this one revealing a blood-soaked scene at a party I had thrown but never wanted. Friends laughed, drinks filled to the brim. Yet in the corner, I saw my best friend, her eyes wide with terror, unable to escape the pull of the darkness lurking just outside. Her scream was lost to the merriment around her, swallowed by the shadows creeping closer. I turned sharply away, while rising as the memories gnawed at me. But one mirror held my gaze, its surface swirling as if alive. I reached forward, tentative fingers brushing the glass. It rippled softly beneath my touch, revealing a dark alley where regret breathed heavily in the air. I saw myself standing there, utterly alone, my heart heavy with secrets I would rather die than admit. A figure emerged from the shadows this time. It was me, untouched by the passage of time, a more sinister reflection, eyes glinting with malice. "What are you?" I choked out, the air around me thickening with dread. The reflection grinned wider, an insidious smile that held no warmth. "I am your truth," it whispered, voice echoing unervingly within the void. "And I am here to remind you of the consequences of your choices." Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath me again, a pulsating thrall that sent vibrations through the air. Echoes of laughter morphed into cries of agony, the mirrors crackling wildly, breaking the uneasy stillness. My sinister reflection laughed deeply, and I staggered back, the walls shifting, warping around me like a collapsing reality. As I fought to steady myself, the reflection stepped forward, almost reaching through the glass with fingers elongated and twisted, grasping for me. "Join me," it hissed seductively, "in the eternal game of our fears. Embrace who you truly are." Wrenching myself away from its grasp, I ran blindly deeper into the hall, desperate to escape my own self-loathing. The sound of splintering glass boomed overhead, a storm of deceit falling down upon me. Frantic, I stumbled through archways of writhing darkness, each one pulling me toward the core of the Carnivala, heart pulsing steadily, waiting for me to succumb. Just as I breached the next threshold, A clawed hand shot from the wall, snagging my shirt and yanking me closer. I screamed, the horrid sensations crashing around me as I witnessed yet another mirror forming, this one an endless pit, reflecting a void where shadows lingered, all too eager for my despair. I was crawling, fighting desperately against the pull of the abyss, but it was no use. Your fears are hungry, and they will consume you, the whispers slithered through the air, echoing around me as I was drawn inexorably closer. With one final surge of adrenaline, I flung myself into an adjoining corridor, heart racing, lungs gasping for air. But what awaited me there was far worse than I ever could have imagined. A carnival stage, lit brightly under a spotlight that pierced through the consuming haze. Standing in the center, a macabre clown, granita visage of pale skin and crimson tears that cascaded down like blood. "Welcome, dear participant," it screeched, voice dripping with malice and delight. "You've come to entertain, but to whom will you perform? The audience or the memories?" The crowd erupted into a wave of tormented spirits, their ghostly faces grinning, weeping, gazing with hungry anticipation. They pressed closer, forming a ripple of despair behind me. A thrumming heartbeat that echoed in tune with the glow of the spotlight. A vile realization sank in. It was time for my performance. "Now dance for us," the clown sneered, pulling macabre puppets from the shadows, each representing a moment from my wretched past. "Or be consumed by what you truly fear. The choice is yours," and as the audience roared with anticipation, I stood frozen, panic crashing over me in waves, for the horror had only begun, and I was about to unveil truths that ravaged the fragile comfort of the soul. Those sinister eyes watched as I prepared for a dance of my own making, a marrow-chilling showdown against the sins I couldn't escape. But just as I opened my mouth to scream, the ground shook violently. A shadow from above threatened to consume us all, darkness looming larger than my deepest regrets. The clown's laughter echoed as the curtain drew back, unveiling a truth I had long buried. And in that moment, I realized there was no way out. My reckoning was just at its beginning. The echo of the clown's laughter shimmered through my mind as I stared at the gaping maw of the shadows above, a sentient darkness that twisted and churned with an insatiable hunger. It loomed like a predator, poised to snatch away my very essence. My heart thundered unevenly in my chest, a frantic drumbeat against the stillness of horror that enveloped me. The audience's faces morphed, their features distorting as if the fear had seeped into their bones, stealing their sanity. They leaned closer, translucent hands reaching out as though they could take part in whatever sacrilege was about to unfold. I could feel their desperation, a collective yearning to experience the act of fear manifested into grisly reality. And then, the clown gestured with a flourish. The puppets danced forward, grotesque abominations of my past, their strings of existence woven tightly around the spikes of guilt that pierced my soul. Each puppet was a remnant of my choices, twisted and distorted. My younger self looking over a failed project, a version of my mother, sunken-eyed and hollow, representing the disappointment I felt I'd inflicted on her, even in death. A woman of shadow emerged, embodying my unresolved conflicts. A silent scream splintered from her lips, and I felt it resonate in my own. "You didn't listen," she breathed, her voice a whisper laced with regret that shattered my thoughts. The razor-sharp precision of her gaze cut through me like a knife, and I was ensnared, every breath heavy with unanswered questions. "Dance," the clown shrieked, carving the air with manic gestures. Reflexively, my body began to move, disjointed and awkward, yet propelled by forces beyond my control. I felt like a marionette, my strings pulled taut by the haunting memories woven into this hellish performance. I spun and twirled, lost in a whirlwind of frightful moments, a deluge of regret that clawed at the skin of reality. "Faster," the clown cackled, delighting in my torment as the figures danced with me, each movement punctuated by the gasps, the cries, and the forgotten whispers of every soul I had wronged. The audience vibrated with a primal hunger that threatened to drown me. I could hardly distinguish my own feelings from theirs. I felt them clawing back from the brink, raking at the layers of my psyche until it felt like it was all about to spill over. I glanced up at the ceiling, where the shadow seems to writhe like a beast unchained, and saw it shrinking, narrowing the space above us as tendrils of darkness snaked toward the heart of the performance. It sought to interlock with my every move, driving me deeper into this macabre dance. Embrace it, the clown urged, prowling around me. Feel the pain, the ecstasy, the loss. Let it fester. Let it become you. With a manic urgency, the atmosphere thickened, and glimpses of my memories flooded back like a torrential downpour, faces long lost, injustices unforgotten. The shadows swirled, and suddenly, they coalesced into a monolithic shape. A dark figure loomed, a memory given life. It was a younger version of my father. I recognized the hat, the jacket that smelled of whiskey and secrets, standing there with eyes wide and vacant, filled with disdain. "You never finished what you started," he intoned, each word heavy like the weight of the world resting on my chest. And suddenly, the lights flickered, and all fell silent. The puppet show stopped mid-motion, the shadows freezing in horror as something far darker pulsed in the room, something ancient and filled with malice. It emanated from the heart of the monstrous audience, igniting a fire of insatiable need. They hungered, not just for entertainment but for dissolution. "Now, little puppet, unravel your truth," the clown howled, gesturing wildly. "For you are nothing but a broken reflection." My body moved against my will, stumbling through my life's narratives, weaving and breaking each thread anew. I felt the audience's collective heartbeat thrumming in rhythm with mine, pounding like a war drum, each thud igniting the shadows above. Felt like the world was teetering on the edge of something unspeakable. But then, with a deafening roar, the shadows unleashed their final fury. A crescendo of darkness surged forward, crashing upon the stage as a deluge of vibrant, wretched memories exploded into my mind. The crowd's glee twisted into a horrendous scream, and the tendrils expanded, greedy for the life force I could no longer distinguish from theirs. In this whirlwind of chaos, I caught a glimpse of the curtain, ripped and frayed, casting doubt whether this stage of torment would ever truly end. Then, with every ounce of despair within me, I fought against the darkness, clawing toward an exit that I couldn't see, driven by the primal instinct to survive, to escape both the horror and myself. "Dare to look deeper," the clown howled as the shadows snapped toward me, chilling fingers of ice trailing just above my skin. "Your reckoning awaits." As I neared the phantom curtain, ready to confront the abyss, the shadows surged one last time, swallowing the stage in a cacophony of terror. Just then, the ground quaked beneath me, and a piercing laughter echoed my own voice, twisted and broken, cutting through the air. A haunting remembrance of a life unlived, breaking at the seams as darkness crashed in around me, threatening to obliterate everything. And in those stretched seconds, I realized the clown's truth. My dance was not a performance but an offering to a darkness that would relish consuming what remained of my soul. The curtain ripped open with a motion as violent as the terror consuming me, revealing a chasm of inky blackness beyond the stage. My heart raced as I stumbled forward, desperate to escape the tightening grip of the shadows. Yet, instead of freedom, there lay the unknown, a cavernous void filled with whispers that sang like sirens, drawing me to the precipice as I teetered between flight and surrender. Suddenly, each stride felt sluggish, as if the ground itself conspired to pull me back into the embrace of the foul entity that had been orchestrating this nightmare. The audience's moans swelled, morphing into chants, their voices colliding into a wretched harmony that vibrated through the air, calling for the return of my darkest secrets. Panic clawed at my throat. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Running wouldn't save me. I wouldn't escape this theater of dread as the applause of despair reverberated in my ears. The world twisted grotesquely. The theater transformed, its walls stretching and contorting into gaping mouths that mocked my every thought. The seats shifted like a grotesque sea of flesh, eyes, mouths, and limbs bursting forth to claw at my very essence, smiling with manic anticipation as I faltered on my retreat. I was ensnared in a living, breathing thin-gone abyss posed to devour the remnants of my once fearful self. My breath came in ragged gasps as I clung to sanity, determined not to surrender to the maddening pull of the darkness. I focused on the faint glimmer of the shattered stage lights, flickering like dying embers, offering flickers of hope laced with despair. They marked my path through the living nightmare. A flicker that promised escape but seemed to whisper, "Only if you dare." Then, I heard a low growl that seemed to rise from the floorboards, coiling around my ankles like a vine, wrapping tighter and drawing me down with a suffocating plea. "It's not enough," it promised with a voice slick and enticing. "More. Feed it." A chill coursed through my veins when I glimpsed the shadows rising from the audience, twisting into grotesque shapes of the lost souls surrounding Maya's symphony of regret and anger. I recognized them, faces I had wronged, tragedies I had unknowingly left in my wake. Their hollow eyes bore into me, demanding recognition and resolution, pulling the very fabric of my reality taut until I felt it might snap. Suddenly, the darkness lunged, and lurid, claw-like hands shot forth, grasping at my skin with icy precision. I screamed. The sound burst forth from my lips as I felt my consciousness unravel under the weight of those I betrayed. The terror rocketed through me. How could I be responsible for the pain of souls trapped between worlds? Through a hazy haze of despair, the clown's figure became clear, standing amidst the chaos with a chilling smile that spoke of ages trapped in torment. "Will you dance with your demons?" he taunted, his voice a slithering whisper that wrapped around my mind and squeezed. "Every moment you hesitate, they grow hungrier." In that instant, I felt time fracture, a shattering echo that collapsed the spaces between breaths, leaving only endless darkness. I realized what I had to do. If I was to face the specters of my own making, I could not run nor hide among the memories that fed the shadows. I had to confront the unearthly truth, the gaping cavity in my soul that craved recognition for the wrongs I had never acknowledged. With resolve coursing through me, I began to unveil their stories, each one jagged and painful. I spoke the unspoken, allowed the sorrow to spill from my lips like blood soaking the ground. The audience leaned closer, their hunger palpable as each revelation of guilt and loss elicited a visceral reaction. I was bare, raw, laying down the shards of my history one by one, but the more I spoke, the more grotesque the shadows became, twisting and writhing in violent anticipation as if summoning something far darker from the depths of my own mind. The clown, face a mask of joy, urged me to keep going. "Let them consume you," he screeched, eyes glinting like daggers. With horror painting the edges of my vision, I felt the ground tremble once more, and something enormous began to push against the fabric of my perception, screaming to be let loose. The audience rose in unison, arms outstretched toward me like an eager prayer, a storm of madness ready to burst through the seams of this reality. And then one final scream, from deep within the void, shattered my revelations into 1,000 pieces. It was my own voice, a rancorous echo that challenged my own intent. "Who do you think you are? You'll never be free." In that moment, the shadows lunged, demanding, devouring, wrapping around my body, pulling at my heart, igniting every regret and sorrow anew. I felt myself being torn away, the very essence of my spirit clawed from reality, snatched into the maw of total obliteration. As the shadows closed in, a thought flickered. What if I was not just confronting the audience but conjuring something far worse than even them? With a deafening crash, I was thrown into a blinding light, and amidst the chaos of the riptide of memories and shadowy figures, I was left teetering on the edge of the abyss. Was I truly free, or had I merely summoned a greater horror from the depths of my own making? I woke in a cold sweat, the heart-pounding daylight forcing through the curtains of my room. But something was wrong. With shaky breaths, I sat up, ice gripping my spine. The familiar smell of my own home was jarring, almost foreign. I blinked fiercely, fighting against the remnants of dreams, but the memories won't fade. I could still hear the echoes of that carnival of terror, the shadows, the voices, the clown's laughter. I got out of bed, heart racing as I stumbled through my house, pushing against the door to the room where it had all happened, where I had fought. The door creaked open, revealing nothing but emptiness within. No puppets, no shadows, just silence. A wave of relief washed over me, yet it was tainted with a creeping doubt. Was that nightmare truly over? Every step down the hall felt heavier, the yawning void of the night still pressing against my consciousness. Shouldn't I feel liberated? I reached the kitchen, gasping at the smell of coffee simmering in the pot. My hand reached towards the mug, but halted mid-air. Gripping myself against the counter, I peered out the window, expecting to see those macabre reflections of my past lurking just beyond the glass. Yet all was still unnatural beyond the city streets. I caught a glimmer of something darker. Shadows didn't dance as they should. Instead, they expanded, reaching toward me with sinister intent. Panic ignited in my chest that I recalled the last word of the clown, and I felt the ground beneath me tremble, not from memory but from something real, something close. Each glance sent tendrils of isolation spiraling deeper into my mind. Then, I noticed the locket I thought I'd lost. There it lay upon the table, gleaming with an otherworldly sheen, beckoning me to come closer. Tentatively, I reached out, remembering the faces trapped inside faces I had fought to escape. A voice slithered through my thoughts, smooth and familiar, like a whisper of silk. You thought you had escaped, but you are still part of the performance. The real show is yet to come. I dropped the locket in horror, but as it hit the floor, it disintegrated into a burst of shimmering darkness, and from that cluster emerged the shadows I had fought so hard to leave behind. They billowed towards me, faces twisted with desire and a grotesque semblance of joy. The very essence of my regrets reformed, stripping away the pretense of liberation I dared to cling onto. Welcome back. The figures sang, their voices swirling, a haunting melody that wrapped around me. The show must go on, dear puppet. You never left. You merely paused that I staggered back, unwilling to accept the reality of this. I had faced my fears. I had wrestled them within that insidious carnival. No! I broke free. I shouted, my voice trembling as memories snapped into a jarring focus. The laughter, the pain, the truths perched on the precipice of my heart. But then I remembered the dark carnival's fate, the souls, the wretched trapped in that place. My resolve splintered like shattered glass as understanding dawned, a horrifying realization that this struggle was but a cycle destined to repeat. Do you wish to join us in this realm of terror? To dance among the shadows and feed the void? Embrace it and you never have to fear again, they chanted. I felt it then, a pull deep within me. The shadows entwined their fingers around my wrist, dragging me back towards the dark abyss from which I thought I had escaped. The tug of darkness enveloped my heart. No! I screamed, forcing my feet to move against the pull, panic coursing through me. I want dance again. I want. My legs faltered, but resolute. I grabbed the countertop, anchoring myself as the shadows clawed closer, inching towards salvation they craved. The faces shifted again, me loved ones, their pain now a weight on my shoulders. Feed us your fear. You are one of us. Suddenly, a sickening laugh erupted around me, the sound echoing infinitely, morphing into a singular question that reverberated through my entire being. Will you become part of our endless story, or will you fade? A part of me wanted to surrender, to embrace the ease of the inevitable. But then the clown's laughter rang through my mind again, the dark pull of those memories now clearer. You were never alone in your fears, for in confronting them, you could either be consumed or rise anew, sharper than before, with a roar that shattered the suffocating grip of despair. I slammed my hands down against the counter with a newfound fury. I chose to fight. At once, the room convulsed as light erupted around the shadows, sparking with energy that sent the dark figures reeling. I felt empowerment surge within me, igniting a fire that blazed against the consuming shadows. The figures hissed in fury, retreating and reforming into grotesque specters of my past as the light enveloped the room. A beckoning warmth began to take shape, surrounding me like a protective blanket. I clawed back through the memories, relinquishing the fear that once chained me, forcing it back into the void that once felt so familiar. The shadows screeched, swirling wildly, cut by the intense warmth of liberation I wielded. All of this carnival of horror, it ends now, I shouted, and with a final surge of will, I banished the darkness with a clap of thunderous energy, sending the specters spiraling into the light, their anguish unraveling before me. But as the winds of change swirled in my wake, I felt a flicker of doubt seep into the edges of my consciousness. What if this was merely another veil, another ruse to keep me trapped in cycles of fear? And then, struck with sudden clarity, I gripped the remnants of that understanding, knowing my battle was not simply against the horrors that mirrored my fears but within the depths of my own heart as well. The haunting specters would forever linger, but they would no longer dictate my choices. That I turned to walk back through the shimmering chaos, confronting the remnants of the carnival and the shadows entwined in the fabric of my reality, bracing myself as the darkness threatened to smother me. Again, just when I thought I emerged victorious, I recognized a pair of glimmering eyes lurking in the shadows, eyes unervingly familiar, filled with cruel mirth. "Your story is not yet complete," it whispered. "We only take a breather. One day you will dance with us again." A chill crept down my spine as the voice echoed like the last breaths of despair. The truth washed over me in cold waves. No matter how far I run, the shadows would always remain, lurking, waiting for the next moment of weakness, ready to reignite the dance. As I stumbled back into my solitude, I felt exposed, vulnerable to the shadows of the world around me. Each creak of the floor, each flicker of light, the whispers and shadows that I once thought I understood. They would linger always, and as the sun set in a fiery red, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the window, and there it was, the shadow of my own twisted grin, the echoing truth of what I had fought against and what would forever define me. No escape, only waiting, and with that last thought swirling in my mind, I understood the dance would never truly end.